You can find links to all our guests' books on the products page at creativityfound.co.uk. Just visit creativityfound.co.uk/products and books.
Basically, I was just off my head, just in the height of madness and meeting not nice people, but me not really knowing they weren't nice people until they started doing not nice things to me. Alcohol was doing bad things to my body. I was taking seizures, ended up in the hospital and they were poking little pins in my legs and I couldn't feel it. They were saying, you need to stop. But the people that got round me were so understanding, even though none of them had been in that kind of position, but they were so understanding of where I was at and made me feel I was welcome. What I started doing was taking women that wanted to detox before they went to Teen Challenge. They would come to me and I would do a 30-day detox with them. And then I would just start talking and I thought more came out of my mouth than I've ever said in all my life. And I was like, I must have just been waiting for this pot to pour all this into.
Hi, I'm Claire, founder of Creativity Found, a community for creative learners and educators, connecting adults who want to find a creative outlet with the artists and crafters who can help them do so with workshops, courses, online events and kits. For this podcast, I chat with people who have found or refound their creativity as adults. We explore their childhood experiences of the arts, discuss how they came to the artistic practices they now love, and consider the barriers they may have experienced between the two. We'll also explore what it is that people value and gain from their newfound artistic pursuits, and how their creative lives enrich their practical, necessary, everyday lives. For this episode, I'm speaking with Fiona Myles about her experiences of growing up adopted, struggling with addiction and mental health issues, and finding her way to a more positive life. In recent years, Fiona has helped many others on a path to recovery through her outreach work and through her writing. Please be aware that in this episode, Fiona talks about taking drugs and attempted suicide. Hi Fiona, how are you?
Hi, I'm fine, thank you.
Good. You have written 2 autobiographies so far, in which you talk about being adopted, among other things, and currently you are keen to help other adoptees where you can. So can you start by explaining to me what your family situation was as a youngster?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I was adopted as a baby. I believe my mum and dad came and they were matched with me when I was about 8 months old. I was told a lovely story about being in an orphanage and they came and picked me out of all these babies, but I've since found out that that's what a lot of social workers tell them to say. Basically, I was actually in a foster home and they just came and picked me up, which doesn't sound as romantic really as the other story. But anyway, so I've always known, my mum and dad told me, all through my sort of early years. And I think I was about 6 when I actually twigged that they were telling me something that was actually made me different, to my brother and sister. I was like, oh, that's different. I kind of started to sink in that I was adopted, and what adopted was.
Yeah. So you were in the middle?
Yes, I was. I was in the middle. My mum and dad had a son of their own. My mum was fostering children and they actually wanted to adopt another little boy that they had been fostering. But it didn't work out. This little boy thankfully went back to his own mum and dad, which was nice. And so then they got matched with me. So they adopted me. And then, as far as I can gather, they weren't intending on having any more. So my little sister was a bit of a surprise. So I ended up being middle child and adopted child.
Yeah. Did you have a creative childhood at home or at school? And was writing something that you enjoyed then?
Yeah, I remember I did write, when I was young. I used to have like notebooks and stuff and I would scroll down imaginations, my mum used to call them, my little stories, and stuff like that. So then I got a typewriter was bought for one of my birthdays, and I remember battering away on that for ages. I loved the sound of it as well. I loved the, click, click, bang, bang kind of one, That, I really enjoyed writing on that. I liked the whole sort of process of writing on that. But that just kind of came to an end, it came to a bit of an end. I just stopped doing it. I probably had a negative reaction to something, to a story or something, and I stopped using it, and the typewriter went away and never came back out.
I had a typewriter as a child in the 70s as well. I had this yellow one and I absolutely loved it. And my children now, well, when they were a bit younger, they love, my mum has got an older typewriter and they just love playing with it.
The round keys.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's beautiful. But anyway, I digress. So, did you feel that this creativity, it was encouraged at school or at home? Do you see a place where it stopped for any reason?
I don't think it was really pushed to the fore, because unfortunately my behaviour took a bit of a turn for the worst. I remember a story of wanting to be a ballerina, and I had this little tutu and everything. I remember my dad telling me that I was just like a clodhopper. I think that was a cartoon at the time, Clodhopper, and he had great big feet. He just kind of made fun of the fact that I wanted to be a ballerina. Little things like that, they have such a profound effect on a child. It kind of tilted me over to the, well, I'm no good at that, and I'm no, and I'd had a negative experience with the writing, so I was no good at that. So basically, the creativity side of me kind of went to the back burner. I was fairly creative in making up stories to get out of trouble. That didn't go away.
You touched on there that perhaps you weren't the best student.
No, I wasn't. I think primary school, I think they were very glad to see me heading off to high school. I lived in the country, so our primary school was fairly small. And then I went to high school, which was, to us, was huge, but it's probably not huge, in comparison to city life. I live in the city now. But high school was just awful, because I'd hit teenage. I was already distressed being adopted. I was already having emotional breakdowns, and just getting to school and people teasing you. And I've always wore glasses and had funny teeth. So I've always been teased. I used to get called Cokie Four Eyes and all that, and silly things that kids say. But for me, it kind of started me on this inward thing of not wanting to come out, and just be in, and I became a very sort of isolated little kid, and yeah, it was difficult. I found teenage difficult. I found the whole being adopted thing difficult. So any creativity that I had, because I do know I'm creative, but at that point it was completely sandbagged under this emotional mess that had become and all the rest of it. So
Yeah, I can understand. So you left home and headed off to London age 17. Why and how did that come about?
well, I was kind of encouraged to leave home because I wasn't going to be allowed to stay at home. From about the age of 16, I had been in a few live-in jobs, like in hotels, and they didn't work out because I was an absolute Fruit Loop, and I just ended up getting into trouble and causing trouble and all the rest of it. So I was always getting sent home, So my mum and dad decided that maybe I would like to be a nanny in London, really far away, so I couldn't come home that easily. So yeah, off I went. This is the early 80s, and away I went to the big city, from a small place in Scotland, and became a mother's help. I think nanny's a bit too grand. Really just being their cleaner, their cook, and taking their kids to school, if I'm honest. But I don't even think you're allowed to be a mother's help anymore.
And how was that experience? You've already explained from being in the real countryside and then in London, and you're on your own, you've got your freedom other than the job. How did that work for you?
It was crazy. I mean, for me, there was the initial trepidation of going somewhere new. I found it all actually really exciting in the beginning. I thought, wow, look at all this new stuff and people everywhere and different cultures. I had never come across people from a different culture, maybe one or two in the larger town, but I found it all really fascinating. I wasn't someone that was a shrinking violet either. I was quite out there, kind of personality. I've talked to anybody. It wasn't daunting in that respect.
And did you find that a good home? Did you find yourself feeling accepted?
I hated it. I wasn't very good at it. I didn't really, I was brought up very well, so I knew how to cook and I knew how to clean because we were all taught well. My dad had taught us all to make soup, from what we grew in the garden. We knew how to make our own pizzas and stuff like that. So the cooking side and the cleaning side wasn't a problem, but I was bored. And being kind of contained as well, within the house, that this was all your tasks and you had to complete them. So then, we got a night off. So I found a thing in the paper that was like a nanny's circle that you could join. So I thought, I'll join the nanny's circle. So off I went to a pub to meet the rest of them and whatever. And that was the beginning of the end, really.
What do you mean?
Well, most of them were older and most of them were more worldly wise than I was. And so they were like drinking, having a laugh, telling stories of this, that, and the next thing. And then they would go outside and they would be rolling up spliffs and stuff. And I was like, I was going outside with them wondering, what is that? I had no idea what it was. That's where it kind of, the getting into using drugs and stuff like that and alcohol on a regular basis. That's where that all started, from the nanny's circle. Sorry, nanny's circle, if you still exist.
Things got worse. You not concentrated, but there was more emphasis on the drugs and alcohol than working. How did the rest of the years play out?
Yeah, I mean, from there, it just went from bad to worse because obviously, this side of stuff became a lot more interesting than cooking and cleaning, looking after somebody else's kids. So then I was getting kicked out of the mother's help positions. And in those days, it was easy to just ring up and get another one, and because there was no checks or anything. So even I think about it now, really, you're going into somebody's home and being left with their children. The last one I got kicked out of, I ended up having nowhere to go. Because by then the agencies, my name was mud. So it was like, no, we're not giving you any families. So I ended up actually sleeping in Victoria train station. That was interesting because I had no choice because I didn't want to phone home and say, oh, well, it's all gone wrong again because I'd already done that quite a few times. And, my mum would always sort of send money or pay a ticket to get me somewhere or whatever. So I just kind of had got to the point where I didn't want to phone them anymore. So I went to Victoria Station because I knew, just talking to people, that a lot of the Scots sort of congregated in Victoria Station for some reason. And so I went along there. Yeah, just that started my life of being a homeless person. I was there for about 4 or 5 months. Just sleeping rough and meeting characters that were totally out there and getting involved in them. And then eventually I went to live in a hostel, met a whole lot of other crazy characters that were into, harder drugs, started taking LSD, sniffing cocaine, doing stuff. And basically I was just off my head, just in the height of madness and meeting not nice people, but me not really knowing they weren't nice people until they started doing not nice things to me. So that in itself brought layers of protection where I knew I needed to stay in that place of taking substances to stop me thinking about the stuff that had been happening. So it became like a vicious circle, and that went on right up until I was about 21, 22 when I decided that I'd had enough, and I didn't want to be here anymore.
Well, that's good to know about the next stage. So I was going to ask, how did you get out of that destructive situation that you'd got yourself into that vicious circle? What did you do to change?
Well, things had gone so from bad to worse, and all the rest of it. And I then ended up in Glasgow in my auntie's flat in the Gorbals, and she lived 21 stories up. And I was there on my own, and I was just drinking and just in a mess. And there was one night, there was a wee song came on the radio. This wee guy used to come on the radio on a Saturday night, Tiger Tim. I don't even know if he's still alive, but it was really good. And he used to sing a wee song when he finished, and he said, what are you going to do after the tiger's gone? And I was lying there like totally steaming and saying to myself, well, I'm going to throw myself off the balcony because there's nothing left for me here, So I've managed to get myself into the balcony and very determined to put myself off the balcony because I thought I need to do something where I'm not going to survive because, I'm not a kind of half measures kind of person. So I've got on the balcony and I've threw myself off. I've been still alive when I've come round. I'm like, I don't believe I can't even do that, right? I'm still alive. And I had visions of pieces of me being, all over the Gorbals. But what had happened was I'd actually fallen back into the balcony. So I was lying in the balcony. I hadn't gone off the balcony. And I think that was a real wake up call in itself that hadn't been able to happen. And so I just kind of managed to get myself together enough and phone my mum and dad and tell them I was in a heap in Glasgow. They thought I was in London. They didn't even know I was that close to them, to be honest. So they came and got me, and I went home for a little while, and then I went off and got a flat to live in Glasgow, and really just kind of got my life onto a place where I was just staying drug induced enough to still be able to function, if you know what I mean. I was still taking drugs, I was still drinking, but it wasn't to the point of obliteration all the time. So to me, that was me getting better, at that point.
You told me a story about Anne and about the church.
Yeah, I mean, I then eventually I was married and living in Falkirk, and this girl Anne had moved into our street. We lived in a street where it was all people that were taking drugs, drinking, and whatever. And like my husband at the time, he was selling drugs. He was selling hash from the house, and so she saw a lot of toing and froing and whatever. And I did have quite a volcanic, I think it's the right way, personality, and I would lose the plot a lot. And so I used to get lifted for fighting and stuff like that. So she realised there was real problems in this house, and her house was opposite. She'd actually asked the council to be put in that street so that she could pray for all the people in the street. I was like, wow. When I found all this out later. So she started praying directly into our house. As time went on, I started to realise that things couldn't keep going on like this. I became very ill. Alcohol was doing bad things to my body. I was taking seizures, ended up in the hospital, and they were poking little pins in my legs and I couldn't feel it. They were saying, you need to stop, you won't come out of a seizure and stuff like that. So I had to really start thinking about what I was doing to my body, what I was doing, to myself and all the rest of it. And then this girl was she was getting into our lives she used to come and do clean easy, and she would chat with you on the doorstep and all that and whatever. One thing led to another, and I started asking her about, did she go to church and stuff? And she took me along to her church. And I didn't think that I could go to a church and feel anything or even be allowed in the doors, with some of the things I'd done. But I went and I had such an experience where I knew that something had definitely happened to me. At that point, I wouldn't have been able to tell you what it was, but I knew that I had experienced something. So I was 29 then, and I just kept going to the church, and I knew that things were going to change. And then the minister was asking, would anybody like to accept Jesus as their saviour? And I put my hand up, not really knowing what I was doing. And I was like, oh no, what have I done? But I had no idea how to manage this situation because I'd never been in church and I felt like I shouldn't be there because of the life I'd led. But the people that got round me were so understanding, even though none of them had been in that kind of position, but they were so understanding of where I was at and made me feel I was welcome, even though I was still smoking like a chimney and whatever, because that didn't just stop. I didn't just have one of those wonderful epiphanies where everything's taken away. For me, it was more of a process, and it was one thing, went and then another. And I began to see actually that God was doing something for me that cemented the belief that I had definitely found a faith, found God. I had found something bigger than myself that, I was able to be a part of as well, because I'd always felt so out of it in every sort of area of life.
Yeah. And you fit in here where perhaps you felt you hadn't fit in other places.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely my buzzword as an adoptee. Joining groups and stuff, for some reason, I always felt like everybody else communicated, but not with me. And I don't know whether that was just in my head or whether that was a reality. I still don't really know. Yeah, there's always been that. And even now, to this day, a recent thing that happened recently, and this is just a bit silly, but this is just to prove a point. I joined a group, which isn't a big group, and then a few other people joined, maybe 4 other people joined, and all of those 4 people were welcomed into the group. But I wasn't welcomed into the group when I joined. So that little drip and tap of rejection, it's still there.
Yeah.
But obviously I know now not to act on that and not to, feel the things that I used to feel that would take me down the path that used to take me down. I was just, I was able to say to myself, well, okay, that happened, so what, get over it. So that little drip and tap does still happen, but I'm more able to manage that kind of thing now. But I still feel it.
Creativityfound.co.uk is the place to go to find workshops, courses, supplies, kits and books to help you get creative. So if you're looking for your own Creativity Found experience, go have a browse to see what's on offer so far. And if you can help adults to find their new creative passion, please get in touch on social media or through the contact details on the website. You started helping other women in similar situations?
Yeah, I did. I felt a real urge and call to, if I could get out of that situation and become drug-free, alcohol-free, nicotine-free, and still have this crazy personality, then other people could do it as well. So I started going down to the places that I knew, and I would go back in and, folk would be like, oh, look at you, I'd be like, oh, you'll never guess what happened to me. And I would be like, come up to my house, let's get you off of drugs and let's do this, let's do that. And, I started just bringing people in at my house off the street, and some went off to recovery places and some were like, you're just a nut job, let me out of here. But, but then the church kind of got behind me a bit in it. What I started doing was taking women that wanted to detox before they went to Teen Challenge. They would come to me and I would do a 30-day detox with them and then take them down to Teen Challenge. And then Teen Challenge would send me their Phase 4 girls that just needed to be out of the programme and doing something. That was really good. And then from that, became a part of a similar ministry called Victory Outreach. Like Teen Challenge, they have recovery homes for men and women, and I became like the manager of the women's home there, and I managed that for 4 years, which was, I loved every minute of it. I just loved seeing them coming in. For me, I was able to know how they were feeling because I knew what I felt like coming into a Christian place. I found it just great to be able to say, look, I get you. I know the things I felt when I first came into Christianity, people moving their handbags and all that. So it's kind of like I knew how that felt and I knew how to help them to get through even that, never mind their detox, never mind all the stuff they needed to learn going forward. Even some of that life experience stuff, it was great to be able to bring that to them,
It's being able to help give an holistic approach. So it's not just a matter of, right, we put you in a place and get you off the drugs. There's so much more to it that that we need those extra people who can understand that and help with that and give the whole life meaning, not just this is the box that you're in, drug addict, get you off the drugs, everything will be fine. So that's really good that there are people out there like you that can help with that side of things, that it's the whole emotional journey. We talked about your possible issues with fitting in as an adopted child, or the feelings that you had around that, and you have an adopted daughter yourself. Can you tell me how you came to adopt Georgie, and how do you think you can ensure or help her to feel differently than perhaps you did?
Yeah, well, I was 33 years yearning for a child. I lost a child when I was very young because I was, like I said before, I was in with this bad crowd and I got badly beaten up. Didn't even know I was pregnant, and I'd lost a baby at about 5 months, 20 weeks I think was 5 months. And then from then I never conceived naturally again. I went through IVF. with my second husband, and that failed. I lost twins through that, and I didn't want to do the IVF again. I found it very invasive, didn't like it. So then going on, when I've got married to Brian, I've let him know, look, we're not going to be able to have kids, blah, blah, blah. Then, time goes on. I've hit the menopause. We've been told that we'll never have children naturally. I didn't want to adopt because I knew how difficult I had found that as a child and as an adult, that not knowing and even finding your naturals doesn't actually put an end to the mystery, because you realise very quickly you don't fit in that nest either because you weren't brought up with them. So anyway, I didn't want to adopt. And then my sister from the family I was adopted out of became a Christian. I went up to see her getting baptised. We hadn't really seen each other for a long time. My natural mum had died and there'd been a funeral, and we hadn't really spoken much after that. Went up there, went to her baptism, stayed the night with her, and she began to tell me about her son had a little girl who was in foster care and was quite poorly. She had a lot wrong with her. She'd had a brain hemorrhage. She'd been born addicted to drugs and lots of things. She took seizures and all the rest of it, but she needed, a forever home kind of thing. A couple of years previous to that, I had been at a conference where I believe that God had told me I'd have a child at 50. And I remember kind of standing there thinking to myself, could that not be a bit earlier, please? but anyway, immediately I knew this was our child, and in the lead up to it, because of the work that we was doing in the women's home and Victory Outreach, I kind of thought one of the girls would have a baby and leave it on the doorstep. I kind of worked out that's what was going to happen, Anyway, we went through this whole process of assessments and all the rest of it, and Georgie became ours just 6 weeks before I was 51. So that came to pass, which for me was fantastic. And also, we then became parents, and I'm 50. So we had this baby that needed so much attention. It was an incredible life tilt, because we had been all those years, with no children, doing whatever we wanted, going wherever we wanted. And then all of a sudden, this little baby was in our house that needed such a huge amount of attention. I was always scared she was going to have a seizure, and all the rest of it. Not that I'd ever seen her having one, but she did take seizures, and the foster carers had given us all the information, and she had medication she had to take every day. So it was a big thing. It was a huge thing for us, a huge life change, but it was the ultimate in joy, because we had our heart's desire. We had a child. There was the two sides of it that balanced each other out. We were told she might not walk. She runs rings round us. My husband actually he got cancer just before we got Georgie. And so he had chemotherapy and was off his work when we got Georgie. So he's a marathon runner. He spent loads of time rubbing her legs and doing things like that. And, I came home from work and she was walking. I was like, oh, he said, look at this, wait till you see this. It was just one of those moments where, wow. But developmentally, yeah, she does have problems. She's in a place at the moment where she still can't read or write. She's making great attempts. And so we know that there's potential there, but it just might be later than, she's not at the stage that 6-year-olds should be at, not by a long chalk. She's in special education where they are fantastic with her because she has emotional problems, and she can get very aggressive and very highly emotional. She has ADHD, she has autism, she has something called DDO, which is a defiance disorder. I was like, I think every kid has that. I didn't know that was a disorder. I thought just every kid had that natural defiance, But at the end of the day, there are areas where Georgie far exceeds 6. She has like a memory that blows me away. She can go on a walk somewhere and tell us, you took me here in my green pram. I'm like, what? She even remembers the colour of the pram she was in, because we went through a lot of prams with Georgie. But yeah.
Yeah. And for some of my guests, having children is what puts their creative pursuits on hold. But with you, it was the opposite. Tell me how you started tapping into your creativity.
Yeah, basically, when Georgie started going to nursery and stuff, and Brian obviously got well, he's got the all clear and whatever. He went back to work. So we decided that he would work full time and I would, stay at home because we realised quickly when she went to nursery there was a lot of problems. We'd get phone calls, you need to come and get her, and all. It's like, oh gosh. But anyway, I decided to stay at home. But I thought, I can't sit here. I just can't sit here doing nothing. So I started I like brooches and stuff, so I started a little thing where I would buy brooches and clean them all up and I would resell them. And then I started painting hearts and stuff and just doing little things where I was filling my time at home because I thought getting bored isn't going to be good for me. But I knew I had to be available. I knew I had to be, so I couldn't exactly either go and meet a friend 2 hours away or an hour away because if I got a call, I had to, get back. Couldn't even fill my time like that. So I started doing lots of little things where I was making stuff and selling it. And then I started writing the books. It was almost like a pilot light went on when I started writing the book, the first book, because I wrote it so quickly. It was very easy to write. And obviously, like anybody else, when I put it through for the people to read, I thought, oh, they're going to get back to me and say, oh, that's rubbish. You know what I mean? But I got so much good feedback from it, and there was very little needing done to it, in the editing process and whatever. And then the second book again, it was very quick getting written as well. I don't think the second book's quite as good as the first one, but the second book's the one that seems to be getting all the attention. But anyway, so that the writing thing was a light going on, and I can't stop writing. I've just started a new blog that I'm doing every Monday. I'm on book 3 now, so it's like, and I've written a few articles. I've written an article for Adoption UK on adoption trauma. I've been in the newspapers and stuff like that. It just seems to have all sort of taken off. I'm almost famous.
Brilliant. You said that you wrote the books easily from a getting the words on the page point of view and not needing a lot of editing, which is fabulous. But how about the process? Were you able to process everything that you were writing, or were there emotional consequences of telling your life stories?
Yeah. I mean, in the process of writing, especially book 1, where I've kind of told more in the book than I've ever told anybody. There's some scary stuff in there. But I realised that a lot of it had remained unvisited, just stayed there, in the past. And there was an incident at work. It was kind of bullying. But anyway, it affected me and it overly affected me, and I couldn't work out why. And then when I was writing the book, I realised that was something that hadn't been dealt with because I'd been attacked by men in the past. I'm not saying this workmate attacked me, didn't. It was just a similar sense of fear, that came around. And so I realised that hadn't been looked at properly. And I actually got professional counselling, which was incredible because it was one of those things where she would say one thing and then I would just start talking. And I thought more came out of my mouth than I've ever said in all my life. And I was like, I must have just been waiting for this pot to pour all this into.
Yeah.
So that was very good for me. I felt much more empowered and stronger and more able because I have had a lot of emails and people contacting me that have been in a similar situation, and I felt in a better place to actually connect with them and say, well, this is how I managed to get through this. I can support adoptees in particular because I know how they feel, and I know how I manage those feelings.
Yeah. So speaking of which, and you've touched on the fact that there's a book 3 in the making as well. What are your plans or hopes for the future?
Well, I have lots of plans. I'm going to continue to write. I feel that, I feel I can give a lot through my writing. I want to say more about the specific feelings that people who have gone through trauma can have. I think in my head I'm going to do 4 books, which will be novels, focusing on a main character that goes through some traumas.
Oh, how exciting!
Yeah, and I have started a group for adoptees especially older adoptees. I've started a little private Facebook group where we can just say the things that we're feeling and some of the things that affect us, and it's actually working really well. I'm really enjoying that, actually.
Oh, that's brilliant. That is so very helpful. So, thank you so much for speaking with me, Fiona. There are links to the books so far. This is Me and Adopted on the Creativity Found website. But how can people connect with you directly?
I have a website, www.fionamylesauthor.com, where everything that you need to know is on there. The books are on there, my blog is on there, and it does focus around adoption and being adopted. It's going to swing between me and Georgie, things that affect her, things that affect me, the drip and tap, all the things that set the drip and tap off, that kind of thing. And then the links to my Facebook group are in the website. I also design adoption wear. It sounds a bit weird, adoption wear, but some of the things that, I have a great T-shirt that's really, really popular, and it just simply says, "Warning, I'm adopted," because us adoptees can be a bit difficult, a bit sensitive. You don't say the wrong thing or we'll never speak to you again. Being, a stay-at-home parent, instead of being someone that works, really has brought out, a whole new side to my life, where I didn't know I could design stuff. I didn't know I could write like that. I didn't know that I could produce things, myself. I've loved just finding that.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting and joyful that there's the variety in it as well, and you can try the different things and really tap into all kinds of sides of your creativity. So that is just brilliant. Thank you so much for talking to me today, Fiona.
No problem. Hope it all makes sense.
It will. It does. See you soon.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to Creativity Found. If your podcast app has the facility, please leave a rating and review to help other people find us. On Instagram and Facebook, follow @CreativityFoundPodcast, and on Pinterest, look for @CreativityFound. And finally, don't forget to check out creativityfound.co.uk, the website connecting adults who want to find a creative outlet with the artists and crafters who can help them tap into their creativity.